Can your surname reveal noble blood? What if your surname sounds noble because it really did come from a noble family? And what if the opposite is true? What if a name like king, duke, knight, or baron has nothing to do with royal blood at all? This is where surnames become dangerous because some family names do point toward castles, aristocratic houses, royal offices, old landholders, and powerful medieval families, but other names only sound noble because of a nickname, a job, a village, a servant's role, or a story that grew bigger over time. So before you decide your last name proves a hidden noble bloodline, we need to separate the truth from the myth. Today we are decoding 10 surnames that people often connect with nobility, royalty, knights, and ancient houses. Some of them really do have elite historical links, some are more complicated, and some may surprise you because the noble-sounding name is not always the noble one. But first, one important rule. A surname can suggest historical, linguistic, or regional roots, but it cannot prove direct ancestry by itself. Noble ancestry requires records, birth documents, land records, wills, parish registers, heraldic evidence, and a traceable family line. A surname is not proof. It is a clue. And sometimes it is a very tempting clue. Number 1. King. King may be the most obvious noble-sounding surname in the English language. If your surname is King, the first thought is almost automatic. Could this name come from royalty? But in most cases, the answer is not that simple. The surname King often began as a nickname. In medieval communities, someone might be called King because he behaved proudly, played the role of a king in a pageant, worked in a royal household, served someone connected to the crown, or simply had a commanding personality. In other cases, the name could be topographic or occupational, connected to signs, inns, estates, or local references. Medieval surnames were often practical and social, not literal genetic statements. That means the surname King usually does not mean descendant of a king. But this does not make the name boring. In fact, it makes it more interesting, because it reveals how medieval society used humor, status, performance, and reputation to create names. A man who was not royal could still become king in the eyes of his village. And once that nickname became hereditary, his descendants carried a royal word for centuries. So if your surname is King, it may not prove noble blood, but it does preserve a social clue from a world where reputation could become identity. It is a name that sounds royal, but often begins with personality, role, or local memory. Number 2. Knight. Knight sounds like a surname that should come directly from medieval warriors, and sometimes it may have a real connection to service, military status, or households connected with knights. But again, the truth is more layered. The surname Knight comes from the Old English knight, which originally meant a boy, youth, servant, or attendant. Over time, the word developed into the familiar medieval meaning, a mounted warrior of noble or semi-noble status. So the surname Knight could have several origins. It might refer to someone who served a knight. It might refer to someone who behaved like a knight. It might refer to a retainer, a military servant, or someone connected to a knightly household. In some cases, it could point toward actual military identity, but it does not automatically mean your ancestor wore armor and owned a castle. That is the key with noble surnames. Words of rank often became surnames for people near rank, not only people who held rank. A cook in a noble household might be closer to aristocratic life than a free farmer miles away, but he was not noble himself. A servant of a knight might carry a name that sounds elite, while the knight's own descendants might carry a completely different territorial surname. Knight is powerful because it holds the atmosphere of medieval Europe: armor, service, horses, household loyalty, and social hierarchy. If your surname is Knight, it may point toward a world of military service and feudal society, but the records must decide whether your family line was noble, served nobility, or simply inherited a name shaped by medieval language. Number 3. Duke. Duke is another surname that instantly suggests nobility. A duke was one of the highest ranks in the aristocratic hierarchy, below a monarch but above many other nobles. So if your surname is Duke, it is easy to imagine a grand lineage. But the surname Duke does not automatically mean descent from a duke. In England and other parts of Europe, Duke could begin as a nickname for someone who acted with authority, dressed impressively, played a noble role in festivals, served in a ducal household, or lived near a place associated with a duke. It could also be connected to the given name Duke, or to local usage that had little to do with actual aristocratic rank. This is one of the most important lessons in surname research. A title used as a surname may be literal, symbolic, occupational, or ironic. Medieval people used nicknames boldly. A small man could be called little. A large man could be called small as a joke. A poor man could be called king. A proud man could become duke. So the noble word is not always noble proof. Still, the surname Duke is valuable because it belongs to a family of status names. These names show how strongly medieval society understood hierarchy. Titles were part of everyday imagination. People knew who ruled, who served, who owned land, and who only pretended to. If your surname is Duke, the best question is not, was my ancestor a duke? The better question is, why did this family become associated with that word? That question can lead to records, regions, occupations, and sometimes a much better story than the myth. Number 4. Baron. Baron is a surname with a direct connection to aristocratic language. In medieval Europe, a baron was a land-holding noble, often connected to feudal obligations, military service, and royal authority. But as a surname, baron can have multiple origins. In English and French contexts, it may refer to someone who worked for a baron, lived on a baron's estate, behaved like a baron, or had some association with baronial land. In some cases, it could connect to status. In others, it may simply be a nickname or occupational association. The name also appears in Jewish surname history, French surname history, and other European contexts, sometimes with meanings that require local research rather than assumptions based on the English title. That is why Baron is an excellent example of a surname that looks straightforward but is not. If a family named Baron lived near a known noble estate, the name might point towards service or tenancy. If the name appears in French records, the context may be different. If it appears in Jewish communities, its origin may involve adoption of surnames under legal pressure in Central or Eastern Europe. One word. Several possible histories. This is why geography matters. The same surname can have different origins in different countries. Baron in England, Baron in France, and Baron in Eastern European Jewish records may not tell the same story. If your surname is Baron, it may point toward noble language. But to understand whether it connects to actual nobility, you need place, date, religion, language, and records. Without those, the name is a clue, not a crown. Number 5. Stewart. Now we move from noble-sounding surnames to a name with a very real connection to power. Stewart is one of the most important surnames in Scottish history. The name comes from the office of steward. In medieval Scotland, the High Steward was a major hereditary position responsible for managing royal affairs. Over time, the family holding this office became so powerful that the office became their name. And then the name rose even higher. The Stuarts became kings of Scotland. Robert II, who came to the throne in 1371, was the first Stuart monarch. Later, the Stuart line became connected to the crowns of England and Ireland as well. The spelling Stuart became popular through French influence, especially with Mary, Queen of Scots. So does the surname Stewart reveal noble blood? Possibly. But not automatically. Many people with the surname Stewart may descend from branches, dependents, tenants, or people who adopted or were associated with the name. A surname shared with a royal house does not prove descent from the royal line. But historically, Stewart is a much stronger noble-linked surname than king or duke because it is tied to a specific office, family, and dynasty. This is the difference between a title surname and a dynastic surname. King may sound royal, but often began as a nickname. Stewart may sound less obviously royal, but it has a documented connection to one of Scotland's ruling houses. That is why surname research can overturn expectations. The name that sounds most royal is not always the one with the strongest royal history. Number 6. Howard. Howard is one of England's great aristocratic surnames. The Howard family became one of the most powerful noble families in England, especially as Dukes of Norfolk. They were connected to court politics, Catholic aristocracy, military leadership, royal marriages, and some of the most dangerous moments of Tudor history. Two queens of Henry VIII were connected to the Howard family, Anne Boleyn through her mother, and Catherine Howard directly. That makes Howard a surname with real aristocratic weight. But again, the surname alone is not proof. The origin of Howard as a name is debated, with possible roots in Old Norse or Old Germanic personal names or occupational and guardian-related meanings. Over time, one particular Howard family rose to extraordinary prominence. But not every Howard descends from the Dukes of Norfolk. This is a crucial point. There can be one famous noble house with a surname and many unrelated families with the same surname. Surnames spread, they change, they arise independently, people adopt them, clerks spell them differently, families migrate. A powerful house can make a name famous, but fame does not make every bearer noble. If your surname is Howard, the name is worth researching carefully because it has a major aristocratic association. But the proof is not in the name, the proof is in the line. Number 7. Percy. Percy is one of the great noble names of medieval England. The Percy family became powerful in northern England and were closely associated with Northumberland castles, border warfare, rebellion, and royal politics. The name itself comes from a place in Normandy. After the Norman conquest of England in 1066, Norman families brought territorial surnames into England. These names often identified families by the lands they came from. That makes Percy a classic aristocratic surname. Norman, territorial, land-based, and connected to feudal power. The Percys became earls and later dukes of Northumberland. They played major roles in English and Scottish border history, including conflicts, alliances, and rebellions. One of the most famous figures connected with the family is Henry Percy, known as Hotspur, remembered from history and Shakespeare. Percy is different from king or duke because it is not simply a title word. It is a surname tied to a specific noble family and a specific place. If your surname is Percy, that does not automatically make you a descendant of the noble house. But the name has a serious aristocratic history and should be researched through location, records, and family line. Names like Percy show how the Norman conquest shaped English surnames. After 1066, many elite families carried names from places in Normandy into England, and those names became markers of land, conquest, and power. Percy is a surname of castles, borders, and Norman aristocracy. Number 8. Neville. Neville is another surname with deep Norman and aristocratic roots. The name comes from a place name in Normandy, often interpreted as new town or new settlement. Like Percy, it entered English history through the Norman world. The Neville family became one of the most powerful noble houses in medieval England. They were especially influential in the north and played major roles in the Wars of the Roses, the dynastic conflict between the houses of Lancaster and York. One of the most famous Neville figures was Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker. His political power was so great that he helped make and unmake kings. That nickname alone tells you how influential the family became. Neville is a strong example of a surname where the noble connection is historically real. But again, the same rule applies. Sharing the surname does not prove descent from the main noble line. Over centuries, names can spread beyond elite branches. They can be taken by dependents, appear through unrelated origins, or survive in families with no direct link to the famous house. Still, if your surname is Neville, it is one of the names worth treating seriously in a noble ancestry investigation. The path would be find your earliest known ancestor, locate the region, trace records backward, and see whether there is any documented link to known Neville branches. Without that chain, the surname is a clue. With that chain, it could become evidence. Number 9. Sinclair. Sinclair is a surname wrapped in history, myth, and mystery. The name comes from St. Clair, a place-based Norman surname. The Sinclairs became prominent in Scotland, especially in connection with Orkney, Caithness, Roslin, and noble titles. The family is strongly associated with Rosslyn Chapel, one of the most mythologized sites in Scotland, often surrounded by stories involving the Knights Templar, hidden knowledge, and medieval symbolism. Some of those stories are speculative, some are romanticized, but the noble history of the Sinclair family itself is real. The Sinclairs held important lands and titles and became one of Scotland's notable noble families. This makes Sinclair a perfect surname for this topic because it shows how noble history and legend can become tangled. A surname may have real aristocratic roots, but that does not mean every dramatic story attached to it is true. Good genealogy separates three things: documented history, family tradition, and myth. Sinclair has all three. If your surname is Sinclair, it may point toward Norman Scottish aristocratic history. But to claim a specific noble descent, you still need records. The name is powerful because it carries both land and legend. And that combination is exactly why noble surnames are so attractive and so easy to misunderstand. Number 10. Plantagenet. Plantagenet may be the most dramatic name on this list. It is the name of one of the most famous royal dynasties in European history. The Plantagenets ruled England for centuries and produced kings such as Henry II, Richard the Lionheart, King John, Edward I, and many others. The name is often connected to Plantagenista, the broom plant, which was associated with Geoffrey of Anjou. But here is the important part. Plantagenet was not used as a normal hereditary surname in the same way modern families use surnames today. It became a dynastic label, especially used by later historians to describe the ruling house. So if someone today carries the surname Plantagenet, that fact alone should be treated very carefully. It may be a later adoption, a romanticized surname, a legal name change, or a rare family tradition. It does not automatically prove descent from medieval kings. This is where the danger of noble surnames reaches its highest point. The more famous the name, the more tempting the claim. But the more famous the claim, the more evidence you need. Plantagenet is a name that belongs to royal history, but modern claims require serious documentation. If the evidence is not there, the name is a story, not proof. And that is the lesson of the entire video. So can your surname reveal noble blood? The honest answer is, sometimes it can suggest a path, but it cannot prove the destination. King may sound royal, but often began as a nickname. Knight may suggest military service, but not necessarily knighthood. Duke and Baron may come from title language, but not always from titled ancestors. Stewart, Howard, Percy, Neville, and Sinclair have much stronger links to real noble houses, but only records can prove whether your family connects to those lines. And Plantagenet shows the biggest warning of all. The grander the name, the more careful you must be. If you want to investigate noble ancestry, do not start with a fantasy. Start with your closest known relatives. Then work backward one generation at a time. Look for birth records, marriage records, death records, wills, land ownership, parish registers, court documents, and regional histories. Watch for spelling changes. Watch for migration. Watch for families who adopted names because they worked for a noble house, lived on noble land, or wanted to sound connected to power. The truth may be noble, but it may also be more interesting than nobility. Your ancestors may have been soldiers, scribes, farmers, servants, merchants, rebels, craftsmen, tenants, or people who survived hard centuries without ever appearing in royal records. A noble surname can open a door, but it is your research that tells you what is behind it, because a surname is not a crown, it is a clue. And sometimes the most powerful family history is not the one that proves you came from kings. It is the one that proves your name survived. If you want more surname histories, ancestry stories, migration maps, and forgotten origins, subscribe to Surname Atlas and leave a comment with your surname and country. It may appear in a future episode.